The first thing Dr. Zalith noticed was the blood. It wasn't the dark blue fluid of his own kind, nor the silvery sap of the elections, but thick, red, and smeared across a fractured slab of alloy plating like someone had tried to paint with it. Zalith adjusted his ocular lens, scanning for life signs. There was one. Faint. Human. He turned his elongated head towards the wreckage. The emergency distress call had pinged just a few minutes prior. A maintenance crew returning from the asteroid ring had been caught in a micrometeorite cluster. The vessel was shredded, half the hull exposed to vacuum, the rest barely holding atmosphere. Most of the crew had already been pulled and stabilized, all except the signal source buried under a collapsed bulkhead. Zalith, report, came the voice of Captain Rilek through his comm implant. There's one more. Human. Alive. Vitals. Unstable. Likely internal bleeding. I'm going in. Zalith moved with grim purpose. His long limbs made it easier to weave through the twisted metal. He reached the jagged edge of the corridor, cleared some debris, and spotted him. The human was crumpled under a large segment of piping, coated in grime and blood. His breathing was shallow, but he was definitely conscious. Stay still, Zalith said, his translator rendering his words into Terran Standard. I'm going to lift this off you. The man's eyes twitched open. You a doctor? He rasped. Yes, Zalith replied. Dr. Zalith of the Varellan Medical Corps. Quinn, the human replied weakly. Quinn Pallister. Maintenance tech. Zalith gripped the edge of the pipe and heaved. It took more effort than expected. Quinn wasn't a small man, and the piping had pinned his lower torso thoroughly. When it finally gave, Quinn sucked in air sharply, face paling. Zalith scanned him immediately. Fractured ribs. Possibly a torn spleen. Leg injuries. He couldn't be moved without stabilizing. I'm administering a stabilizer, Zalith said, injecting the human with a clear solution. You'll feel lightheaded. Too late for that, Quinn muttered and passed out. Zalith worked fast. He applied a compression wrap to the abdomen, inserted a spinal support brace, and called for emergency evac. The rescue team arrived moments later, and together they lifted Quinn onto a hover stretcher and navigated the wreckage back to the med bay. That's when the real trouble began. Quinn woke in stages, first the sterile scent, then the beeps of monitors, and finally the dull throb in his side like an angry drumbeat. He opened his eyes, blinked at the ceiling, then turned his head slowly. Zalith stood nearby, making notes on a tablet-like device. You're awake, Zalith said without looking up. Feels like I got hit by a freight shuttle. You were nearly bisected by a heating pipe. Quinn attempted a laugh but winced halfway. Guess I'm lucky. Zalith finally looked over. Lucky is not the word I would use. A nurse in Olsian with translucent skin and 3 arms entered and began checking the 4 lines. Zalith moved to the bedside, examining the scans on his screen. You have 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe bruising on both legs, and your left ankle is not in alignment. Quinn glanced down and saw the temporary brace. So, when do I start walking again? Zalith blinked slowly. You won't be walking for at least 6 weeks. Possibly more. Your body needs time. Human bones are inefficient. Quinn didn't look convinced. I've walked on worse. You shouldn't have. Zalith sat, his long fingers steepled. You were conscious while pinned, and you didn't scream once. That is concerning. Didn't feel like wasting breath. Quinn muttered. I ran your neural response through our pain index calibration. Zalith continued. Your readings were in the critical range, but your vitals remained stable. That is not typical. Quinn shrugged with one shoulder. Maybe I'm just built weird. Zalith tapped the screen. Or your tolerance for pain is dangerously high. If you had passed out sooner, we could have intervened with less complication. As it stands, your injuries worsened because you endured through them. That's not a compliment, is it? No. Zalith stood and gestured to the nurse. Keep him under observation. No movement unless medically approved. Quinn watched as he left the room, muttering. Dr. Sunshine leaves the building. The next few days passed in a haze of scans, medication, and sleepless nights. Quinn hated being still. Every hour he was stuck in that bed felt like wasted time. On the 5th day, things took a turn. A burst pipe in the med bay's lower deck sent boiling coolant into the equipment room. The unit's primary lift system shorted out. Emergency protocol kicked in, and Zalith rushed to coordinate the evacuation of critical supplies before they degraded. We need the backup coolant units transported manually, Zalith said, scanning the damage. Each weighs about 50 kilograms. Your people can't lift that? Quinn asked from his bed, hearing the commotion through the open door. Zalith turned to him. We are not designed for heavy lifting. Our structural systems are less dense. Quinn pushed himself up slowly. Unstrap my brace. No, I've been laying here for 5 days. I can carry a few boxes. You have broken ribs. I've had broken ribs before. I'll wrap tight. Zalith stared at him. Quinn, this is not advisable. Neither is losing your med bay to overheating. Against Zalith's orders and comments since Quinn stood. He wrapped his ribs with a compression band, braced his ankle, and limped toward the storage area. Zalith followed, clearly expecting him to collapse. Quinn didn't. Instead, he bent at the knees, grunted, and lifted one of the coolant units off the floor. Then another. Then a third. Zalith checked his readings in disbelief. You are operating at 37% capacity. That should render you immobile. I'm not exactly thrilled about it either. Quinn muttered, sweat forming on his brow. You are in active pain. Yeah. Quinn replied, setting the unit down gently. Hurts like hell. Then why continue? Because no one else can. Not fast enough. Zalith watched, stunned, as Quinn repeated the process until all 5 units had been relocated. By the time he finished, his shirt was soaked, his hands trembled, and he nearly collapsed back onto the stretcher. The nurse rushed forward. He should be sedated. No, Quinn gasped. Not yet. Zalith crouched beside him. You could have torn a ligament. Your ankle is swelling. Check it later, Quinn said. Let me breathe first. Zalith stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, your tolerance remains. Unbelievable. Quinn managed a tired grin. You should see me when I stub my toe. The medbay stabilized, and Quinn was promptly strapped back into full recovery mode. X-rays confirmed a minor strain in the ankle, but no further damage. Zalith didn't speak to him for 2 days. When he finally returned, he brought a data pad. I've submitted a formal report to Central Medical Command, Zalith said, setting it down. You are now the subject of a comparative physiology study. Quinn raised an eyebrow. I didn't sign up for that. You lifted over 200 kilograms while recovering from internal bleeding. You also resisted bone pain thresholds that cause neural shutdown in most species. Quinn frowned. So, I'm a lab rat now? Not quite. More like a case study. You'll be monitored during rehab. I've also requested that your recovery be extended to ensure you do not attempt any additional heroics. Quinn sighed and stared at the ceiling. That's going to be a long few weeks. Zalith shifted slightly, then added, You saved the med bay's core systems. Your actions were ill-advised but effective. Was that almost a thank you? It was a statement of fact. Quinn chuckled softly, then winced. Okay, laughing still hurts. Zalith stood. You should rest. And resist the urge to lift anything larger than a spoon. I'll try, Quinn said, closing his eyes again. But even as he drifted off, Zalith remained standing there, watching him with something bordering on confused admiration. The first time Quinn argued with Zalith about the crutches, it was over breakfast. Or what passed for breakfast on the Varellan medical frigate, a gelatinous cube with the texture of old tofu and the flavor of warm dust. Quinn stared at it like it had personally offended him. I'm not using those things, he said, nodding toward the pair of thin, curved supports leaning against the wall. Zalith, who had just finished reviewing a patient chart 3 beds down, didn't look up. You will. They don't even have proper grips. What am I supposed to do, flap my way around like a bird with a hangover? They are calibrated for spinal alignment and balance redistribution. Your objections are aesthetic. They're undignified. You are recovering from multiple fractures. Dignity is a luxury. I'll crawl. You'll fall. Quinn picked up the cube with a fork and let it jiggle. I'd rather eat this than use those. You already are. Quinn dropped the fork. That explains the aftertaste. Zalith finally turned, folding 2 of his hands behind his back. You have 2 options. Use the supports or remain confined to the med bay's lower quadrant for the next 36 rotations. Quinn squinted. That's like 6 weeks. 5.5. I'm not staying in here 5.5 weeks. Zalith pointed at the crutches. Then walk. The supports beeped faintly as Quinn seized them. They adjusted to his height and posture, folding slightly around his forearms. He took 2 steps, winced, and muttered something under his breath that Zalith chose not to translate. I'm going to build better ones, Quinn said, navigating slowly toward the corridor. That would require materials. I'll improvise. Zalith didn't argue. He simply followed, quietly noting the subtle limps still present on Quinn's left side. By mid-shift, Quinn had reached the fabrication lab. The technician, a Grelvian with skin like mercury and no visible eyes, watched him skeptically. You are not cleared for mechanical assembly. I'm not building a ship, Quinn replied. Just fixing a pair of sticks. The Grelvian's entire upper body shifted shape slightly, a sign of confusion or perhaps digestion. Your medical status is still flagged. I'll sit the whole time. Your file says you lifted coolant units while internally hemorrhaging. Yeah, and I won't do that again unless someone pipes boiling chemicals into my bed. The Grelvian made a sound like 2 spoons clinking and waved a limb toward the bench. Do not overexert. If you collapse, clean it yourself. Quinn sat, unpacked the supports, and began disassembling them with quick, practiced hands. He requested a set of polymer grips, a weight distribution core, and a shock-absorbent ankle stabilizer. The Grelvian handed him parts without comment, occasionally watching as Quinn tested the flex of a joint or the angle of a support bar. 2 hours later, the result was a pair of reinforced, jointed crutches with swiveling footpads and adjustable tension springs. Quinn stood slowly, shifted his weight, and took several steps with only minimal pressure on his recovering leg. Zalith arrived halfway through. You modified assistive equipment without supervision, he said, scanning the crutches. I improved them. Want me to make you a pair? You've got the legs for it. Zalith ignored the jab and ran a quick scan of Quinn's posture. Weight distribution is improved. Energy expenditure reduced by 16%. You may have accidentally achieved something useful. Accidentally. I still recommend restraint. I'm sitting down before I do anything else, Quinn said, already lowering himself onto a bench. Happy? No, the next shift, Quinn was assigned light physical therapy with a Soren specialist named Dreen, an avian humanoid with a voice like wind chimes and a tendency to hover instead of walk. Dreen examined Quinn's revised supports, fluttered approvingly, then gestured toward the corridor lined with a balance track. You will walk. No limping. No shortcuts. And definitely no lifting anything. Quinn began down the track, his crutches clicking softly. Several Varela nurses paused to glance as he passed. One whispered something in a dialect Quinn didn't understand, but Zalith, just arriving, responded in the same language. What did she say? Quinn asked. She believes you're a reconstruction android. Why? You are ambulatory too soon, and your repairs were not authorized. Tell her I prefer the term cyber enthusiast. Dreen flapped lightly in place. Again, Quinn turned and began the return stretch. Dreen's eyes flickered. You favor your left side. Correct it. I'm trying, but my ankle's still throwing tantrums. No excuses. You're a tough crowd. Dreen hovered close. Toughness is irrelevant. You either recover or you do not. Zalith remained silent as Quinn completed 4 circuits. By the 5th, a trickle of sweat ran down the back of his neck. His breathing quickened. Dreen noted this, but didn't stop the session. By the 6th circuit, Quinn's grip trembled slightly. He paused at the end of the track and leaned against the wall. Break, Dreen said. Quinn sat heavily. Zalith approached with a hydration unit and held it out. Quinn took it, nodded once. That bird's got no mercy. She does, Zalith said. She just considers it inefficient. Later that cycle, Quinn was cleared for limited access to the observation deck. He stood at the viewport, watching the stars drift across the void. A nearby maintenance drone buzzed past, adjusting an external sensor array. Zalith joined him. Why do you push so hard? Quinn didn't look away from the stars. Because if I don't, I'll get left behind. You are already ahead of recovery projections. Projections don't mean much in a crisis. I don't want to be the guy they leave on the floor next time. You believe there will be another accident? There's always another something. Zalith studied him for a moment. You do not fear pain, but you fear helplessness. Quinn exhaled. Yeah, that's about right. Zalith turned back toward the corridor. Then train your limits. But know them. I'm trying. You are succeeding, albeit recklessly. Quinn chuckled. You'd miss me if I broke something again. No, I would simply recalibrate my disappointment. The next day, an emergency drill was triggered. Smoke simulated from a vent near the engineering wing. The exercise was unannounced and designed to test crew response. Quinn, resting in the upper lounge, felt the vibration of the alarm and immediately reached for his supports. Zalith, passing through the corridor with a diagnostic unit, saw him limping toward the elevator. You are not part of the drill. Then I'll be an observer. Return to your station. Not until I see where the smoke's coming from. There is no real fire. Then I'll be the first to confirm it. Quinn reached the engineering deck before Zalith could stop him. The simulated smoke was dense, but not harmful. 2 Varellan technicians were attempting to seal a bulkhead override that had jammed. One of them struggled with the manual lever. Quinn limped over, adjusted his stance, and braced himself. Get out of the way. The technician hesitated. Now. Quinn gripped the lever, planted his crutches, and pulled sideways. The mechanism shrieked, then clicked into place. The technician stared at him. Your species is structurally inefficient. Thanks. Zalith arrived as the smoke vents deactivated. This is not convalescence, he said. Nope, Quinn replied. It's just me, not being useless. You are redefining recovery guidelines. I am to inspire. You are giving my department headaches. Quinn leaned on his supports, grinning. That's just a bonus. Zalith examined the lever, then looked back at Quinn. I will draft an addendum to our interspecies trauma handbook. Call it the human problem. Zalith tapped his data unit. Too vague. I'll call it unexpected variables. Quinn nodded. Fair. It was the 78th hour since Quinn's first unsupported walk, and the med bay finally downgraded his status from critical recovery to transitional outpatient. This meant 3 things. He could leave the recovery deck without a chaperone. He was allowed to eat outside the mess hall if he didn't complain about the taste, and he was issued a proximity badge that beeped if he strayed more than 100 meters from a medical sensor array. What it didn't mean, however, was that he was allowed into the maintenance tunnels. Quinn was in them anyway. The tunnel was narrow, with piping overhead that hissed with temperature regulation gas. A low-frequency hum vibrated the floor panels as the ship adjusted its orientation near a gravitational anomaly. Quinn crouched beside an open-access panel, a diagnostic wand in one hand, his modified crutches leaning on the wall behind him. A Soren junior engineer peeked around the corner. You are not authorized to adjust power relays. I'm not adjusting, Quinn said, tightening a wire coupling with a tool shaped like a flattened horseshoe. I'm correcting a bypass someone else adjusted badly. That's not better. This valve was redirecting charge to a non-essential loop. It's been draining 0.5% from the environmental stabilizers. You're not cleared for engineering work. Quinn glanced at the engineer. You want to file a report? Go ahead. But if you wait 2 minutes, I'll have this fixed and be out of your hair. The Soren hesitated, feathers puffing slightly, then gave a reluctant nod and left. Quinn finished the adjustment, resealed the panel, and stood slowly. He winced as his knee clicked, then leaned on the wall until the ache passed. A low chime echoed from his proximity badge as Zalith's voice came through his comm. You are outside the approved radius. I'm in the vent corridor behind Deck 7. A relay was misaligned. Return immediately. I'm walking. I will meet you halfway. Quinn sighed, grabbed his crutches, and began limping toward the nearest hatch. As promised, Zalith appeared at the junction, arms folded, expression unreadable. You are compulsively disobedient. I'm proactively useful. You are risking structural ray injury. I didn't lift anything. You crouched. That counts. Zalith scanned him with a portable unit. Joint swelling has increased. You may have stressed the lateral ligaments. Quinn leaned against the wall. I iced it this morning. With what? Coolant gel wrap. Borrowed from the med supply bin. You are not authorized to never mind. Return to the med bay. I can walk fine. You are walking like a malfunctioning cargo loader. Quinn grinned, but Zalith didn't react. Instead, he turned and began walking slowly, forcing Quinn to match pace. They moved in silence until they reached the main corridor, where 2 Krellian officers passed, glancing at Quinn's gait. Zalith waited until they were alone again. You disregard medical instruction with remarkable consistency. I trust how my body feels. Your body is lying to you. Quinn stopped. Then why can I still move it? Because humans are biologically inefficient and neurologically stubborn. Quinn took another step. That's one way to say resilient. Zalith didn't respond. Back in the med bay, Quinn submitted to a fresh scan. The swelling was mild. Nothing torn. A slight increase in fluid retention, but nothing alarming. Zalith applied a mild anti-inflammatory patch to the ankle, then sat across from him at the diagnostic station. You should not have been able to crouch for an extended period. But I did. Zalith narrowed his eyes. Your musculoskeletal recovery is ahead of schedule by 19 days. And yet you continue to test limits. Because I need to know where they are. You already found them. Then walked past them. I didn't break anything. Yet. Zalith entered the scan results into the central log, then looked up. There is a reason other species do not behave this way. Pain is a regulatory mechanism. It's also a warning, not a prison. Zalith leaned back. You make recovery sound like punishment. Because to me, doing nothing is worse than hurting. Zalith stared at him for a while. Then, unexpectedly, he stood and gestured toward the adjacent room. Follow me. Quinn raised an eyebrow. To where? Zalith didn't answer. The adjacent room was used for kinetic rehabilitation. It held resistance bands, adjustable grav plates, and a low-impact tension simulator. Zalith activated the simulator and input a custom setting. Stand on the platform. Quinn limped forward and stepped on. Zalith adjusted the tension. This will simulate a low-gravity load-bearing environment. You will attempt to walk at a steady pace. If you exceed tolerances, the platform will halt. Quinn nodded. What's the catch? No crutches. Quinn hesitated. You're serious? You claim to know your limits. Demonstrate that. Quinn stepped off the crutches and handed them to Zalith. Slowly, carefully, he placed one foot forward. The platform adjusted, shifting slightly as his weight settled. He took another step, then another. His balance was uneven, but the pain was tolerable. After 8 steps, his left leg buckled slightly. The platform halted. Zalith reset it. Again, Quinn exhaled and started over. This time, he made it 10 steps before his hip tensed, and he had to stop. They repeated the sequence 6 times. Each attempt ended with a slight failure, but a longer distance. Zalith watched every movement without comment. On the 7th run, Quinn completed the full circuit. Zalith deactivated the platform. You are not ready for full load exercise, he said. But I'm close. You were closer than expected. Quinn sat on the edge of the platform, sweat on his brow. Why the change? You've been telling me to rest for days. You were not listening. Now that you are, we can proceed with calibrated progress instead of reactive resistance. Quinn nodded slowly. So this is your version of a green light. It is a yellow light with a cautious advisory. I'll take it. Zalith handed back the crutches. Do not mistake this for approval. Wouldn't dream of it. 3 days later, a small asteroid fragment struck the ship's shielding array. It was non-critical, but the impact disrupted several stabilizer nodes near the outer hull. The incident occurred during a shift change, and the engineering team was delayed in reaching the breach point. Quinn, now cleared for partial exertion, was on corridor duty near the damaged section. He arrived within 5 minutes, saw the flickering panel, and checked the pressure gauge. A leak was forming behind the outer seal. Not dangerous yet, but if it expanded, he grabbed the emergency sealant from the wall unit and limped toward the access shaft. A Krellian officer arrived just as Quinn opened the hatch. You are not cleared for that area. I'm temporary response. I've got a patch kit. You lack environmental armor. Quinn held up a portable sealant mask. I'll be fast. The Krellian hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes. Quinn entered the shaft, moving quickly. The air was still stable, but the temperature was dropping. He reached the breach point, applied the sealant, and activated the hardening cycle. The panel held. He returned before the 10-minute mark. Zalith was waiting at the corridor entrance. I monitored your vitals, he said. Your heart rate spiked 30%. I ran. You also lifted the patch kit. It weighs 8 kilograms. I used both hands. Zalith stared at him. You continue to do the wrong things for the right reasons. Quinn leaned against the wall. Then maybe I'm just the right kind of wrong. Zalith's gaze didn't shift. You are exhausting, but effective. Zalith turned away. I'll revise your clearance. Does this mean I'm officially useful again? It means you're no longer a danger to yourself. Mostly. Quinn smiled. That's the nicest thing you've said to me. Zalith kept walking. Do not make me regret it. By the next cycle, Quinn's file was updated. Not flagged. Not restricted. Approved.